Hello and welcome to find out if speed paints are as good as the hype surrounding them. My first ever experience using speed paints is shown in the top left on an all white Tyranid, and in the larger video is the second time I've ever used them. On the Space Marine, however, I have changed the approach from all the lessons I've learnt from painting the Tyranid. I found that painting these speed paints, or the next gen paints, over a completely white figure produced a lackluster finish. To see if the speed paints work better over other colours, I decided to paint the Space Marine a very light blue. The AK Interactive Next Gen paints did surprise me with their very resilient finish. The rub and fingernail scratch test wouldn't lift the paint off at all. If you're wondering why I used a black base coat for the Space Marine and not the white that's recommended on the paint set, it's because of the first lesson I learnt using the next gen paints. If the brush can't reach an area of the model, you'll get white shadows. With all the individual details painted white, it was time to start using the speed paint. The second lesson I learnt using these paints is if you accidentally paint an area you don't want the colour on, any other speed paint you put on top will show the mistake underneath. For the third lesson, you can see it all over my hands. This is because I found out that you have to be quite quick in your workflow to apply the paint. I'll showcase this later when I go through the pros and cons of this product. I touched up certain areas with the white paint as I was quite haphazard, seeing as this is the first coat. All the secondary colours applied to the model now were done using great care. Trying to touch up any mistakes now would be quite difficult, but having a second wet paintbrush to hand will help quickly clean up areas you accidentally touch. Although it may seem I'm following a particular paint pattern, I am actually applying all the different colours and metallics on different types of surfaces, be it large flat areas, thin areas and textured. I applied some metallics over a black base as well to see how that would come out. One of the reasons why I say you have to paint quickly with these is that the paint and the medium seem to separate very quickly. So either paint quickly or constantly stir. On the Tyranid model, I also worked out that applying the metallics too thick didn't create any shadows, but the non-metallic paints needed to be applied thick for the shadow effects to work. I personally don't think these are beginner paints as marketed as can be seen here. On large flat areas, the paint can dry very patchy, and the black paint, for example, left no shadows on highlights on this belt strap, but worked amazingly well on this Space Marine's nappy. The gold metallic speed paint looked good, however I would have liked the shadows to be much darker. Another difficulty is touching up any mistakes, as reapplying the speed paint on top of itself creates all these brush marks. The final larger problem I had with this product is shown on this little Space Marine's knees. One of them has lovely shadows and highlights, the other does not. This may be because of how it dried, or I might have just forgot to constantly stir it on my palette. The main reason why I think it's not very beginner friendly is that if you're used to working with acrylics, every muscle memory you have works against you using the speed paints, and applying them like acrylics really doesn't work, so you have to fight against your instincts when applying it. And if you start out using these paints, you'll have to unlearn all the bad habits you learnt applying this stuff when you want to progress in your painting skills. But back to the painting tips. Agrax Earthshade applied to a white base makes a simple earth effect, and if you thin it down with some water, glazing the Ultramarine's shop clothing tags helps create those delicate little shadows on the white background. Seeing as I don't want to waste any of this paint, I mixed all the unused colours together except for the metallics to apply all over the stone areas on the base. I also didn't mix them very thoroughly as I wanted a very random finish on all those little flat surfaces. This was also to see if mixing the colours would actually have some sort of adverse effect. To give this figure a little bit more visual interest, I reapplied the white to the eye sockets and painted them with some fluorescent orange paint, making sure to apply it to all the surrounding areas like the edges of the helmet. To try and fix the patchy work on the shoulders, I figured applying decals would fix that problem. As these were the typical Games Workshop poor quality decals, they were too thick to conform to the surface. Fixing this problem involved opening my trusty microsole and applying it on top of the decal to soften it. If I knew the decals were going to be this thick, I would have put some microset on the model first. Just remember though, if you are using this stuff, do not wipe the excess liquid off. Use a gentle rolling motion on a little cotton bud. I did accidentally knock the decal with my finger before the setting solution was dry, so this ear will be no longer part of the paint job. And his unit number is, well, if you know, you know, and if you don't, you're too young. As this model was more of a test piece, I wanted to try out a highlighting technique I use on model tanks. Simply, instead of using lighter colours for edge highlighting, just a silver paint will do. This way the light will actually shine off the edges, catching the eye. It will also work as a chipping effect and sell the illusion that he's actually wearing metal armour. A dark wash was also placed into all the holes of the flamer weapon, as I wasn't happy with the finish. As the contrast paints come with no instructions, I wouldn't recommend using a wet palette as it just soaks through onto the sponge. Before gluing the figure together, it's time for a bit of fun. To make him look unique, I think a flag will do. For this, a piece of tin foil is attached to some masking tape with a small metal wire for the flagpole placed to one side, and everything sandwiched all together. After making sure everything is flat and firmly pressed together, it's a simple process of just trimming off all the excess masking tape. As forward planning is not one of my ultimate skills, but fixing my lack of planning is one of my skills, scoring the wire with a blade will help you remove the excess tape you can't cut with your scissors. Unfortunately, this next part requires very little skill, and the more thought you put into it, the worse the outcome will look. I find it's best to just randomly hack away with a blade on all the edges of the flag, or randomly pull chunks away with a pair of pliers to create a random worn and torn effect on the edge of the flag. Also, tearing the tape with your fingers lengthways can help in breaking up all the even areas even more. This will also create a frayed edge. The tin foil inside the flag will help it retain its shape when it is rolled up to create flowing cloth flapping in the breeze. After separating the edges and priming the flag white, one would think some more painting is required. But there's one thing that we all know about the Space Marines in the 40k universe, is that at the first sign of conflict or the start of every battle, the white flags are raised, and their cowardly chant that they're taught from day one is as follows: "I surrender, please don't hurt me, I'll tell you everything you want to know." But seriously, let me know, what do you think? Does this look good? And did you hear me say he's wearing a nappy? Thanks for watching, and have fun.